topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaxon. I am a core alignment coach, which means I support organizations and individuals in identifying their core values and watching for patterns of bias that are causing harm to them or others so they can develop new habits that are far more beneficial to them and everyone else, far more inclusive, and help them align their actions with their values. I'm also a diversity educator, and I have a wonderful guest today, Pattie Fong. The title of today's show is The March Fong Eu Story, a recently published biography about an amazing woman who just dissolved barriers before there were even organizations to help people dissolve barriers. Pattie, thank you for being here. March Fong Eu was your aunt, right?
That's right. She and my mother were sisters, and they both married Fong, so that's how we end up with Fong. And here's the book.
Wow, and it is called, what's the subtitle? I know it's called The March Fong Eu Story, and what's the tagline?
An authorized biography of an unauthorized woman, because she really was the first. When she was elected, she grew up in the Merced County. She was born in the back of her father's hand laundry. This is like, basins of water, boiling water, and you wash things by hand and iron them for people. And that was in Oakdale, California. And then the family moved to Richmond and did hand laundry there. And they lived behind the laundry at all these locations. And she grew up and graduated from Richmond High School. And there weren't a lot of opportunities then. She was told by people that being a teacher was not a possibility, that being a scientist, she wanted to be a soil scientist. They said that wasn't a possibility. An adult told her, why don't you go back to China and help your people? But she ignored them all. And all her siblings went to college. And she went to UC Berkeley and finished up at UC San Francisco with a degree in dental hygiene. And she became the first dental hygienist hired by the Alameda County Schools. She went into the classroom and taught little kids how to brush their teeth. Amazing that they had money in those days. She married her first husband, who was a dentist. And when he went off to war, she joined a Chinese Young Women's Society that was sort of like a sorority, but not connected to a university. But they did dinners and entertained GIs and tried to support the war effort. She worked as a dental hygienist only in the schools. And she managed to become the division chair of the UCSF dental hygiene department, because the chairman had died and they just invited her. And so when she was like in her mid-20s, chair of a UCSF division while she's working in Alameda County. And she went on to get her master's degree from Mills College and went on to get a doctorate in education from Stanford. Not bad for our little girl who grew up behind a laundry and was told that she couldn't get anywhere in the inner world. She started dabbling in politics with the Alameda County Board of Education. And it was a special year in that all the Board of Education trustees were being elected before they were appointed. And it enlarged the number of seats. So she won in the Alameda County Board of Education, but she realized right then in that first elected position that the good old boy system, she was going to have to face that because the superintendent already had his hand-picked candidates for his board. And she wasn't one of them, but she won. But she had someone else who was in that same situation. And so the superintendent would think that they're ganging up on him and being mean to him, but she was just being independent, not being the superintendent's yes man. And so she did Alameda County Board of Education for 10 years. And then during that time, she started lobbying in Sacramento for the boards of education statewide. They didn't have a presence in Sacramento. So she would drive up with other people to go testify before legislative committees. And she started to learn what the legislative process was. So she did Alameda County Board of Education for 10 years. And then when a seat came open in the state assembly, she ran. She had a real nasty run-in, though. When she was a dental hygienist, she at some point became the president of the Association of Dental Hygienists, the nationwide organization. And they piped in on different issues. And the issue that came up during her term as president was whether this is a national association. They're looking at Texas dental hygienists. Texas dental hygienists, like dental hygienists all over the nation, they were being controlled by the Dental Association. And the Texas Dental Association had a clause that would not let blacks dentists join their association. And the Texas Dental Association wanted their dental hygienists to adopt that same language in their constitution. And Auntie March took them on. And she had the backing of some of her compadres in the dental hygiene area, but not enough. So she took on the Texas Dental Association, and her association actually blackballed her. They censured her, and they tried to hide it. And that's
let me ask at this point in her career about how old she was, and about what year was this, and about how old was she?
The 1959 was when she was censured by her own dental hygiene association. So she was born in 22. She was 37 years old.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that the association, the Dental Association, tried to clean up their record. They destroyed their minutes. They denied that they had censured her.
Wow.
They were actually denying the meeting had happened. But what was really cool is we found the original censure letter, blue ink and all, in the regular envelope. It was really important for her because somehow it passed down to my stuff. And I was like, oh, here's the letter. And so we have a piece of history where that was her first dabbling into civil rights, because she saw that the dental hygienists, they wouldn't let guys become dental hygienists. There was something in the law where they could not enter the field. So it was like a male dominant dentist profession dominating dental hygienists, which are all women. Anyway, so that was her first taste of politics at the professional level. So she ran for assembly and won it and served starting in 1967. So how old was she then? She was 45. She was 45 years old. At the time, there were 3 women in the assembly, a body of 80.
Oh,
And it was
God.
the year when Yvonne Brathwaite Burke, the African American woman from LA, and Pauline Davis, who took over her husband's seat, and she was from Northern California, like Plumas County or something like that. They were the 3 women in the assembly, and when once a year they take pictures on the Capitol steps, and they always put the women in front. And so Auntie March always made sure that they gave them flowers, so you could really pick them out, but you could really see them. Everyone else is in black suits, and there's 3 women in front. And so she took on the misogyny of the assembly at the time. It was a good old boys atmosphere. For socialization, they would do golf games. She'd sign up, and then they say, "Oh, you can't come." They would have parties, and the leadership would have delivered to Auntie March and Yvonne Brathwaite Burke a case of liquor and say, "You can't come to our party, but here, have your own party." And they've got this case of liquor. She took it in good. She handled it well because Auntie March had a good sense of humor, and she could turn things to her advantage. Like once when she was in assembly, the assembly at that time was dealing with environmental protection, consumer protection. The first women's commission, the Commission on the Status of Women, was formed. Those sort of new issues were coming to into the public arena. And there was one issue where she tried to get the peninsula air quality guys to come to a hearing, and they refused to come to a hearing. And there would be a press comment in the news saying, "Well, the guy who refused to come, he used to be a 49er linebacker." And the press coverage would say, if they were to take a bet on whether March Fong would win over this guy from the Air Quality Control Board who used to be a football player, they'd bet on her. Auntie March
That's
is
a lot.
Auntie March is best known for that pay toilet thing. Do you remember
Oh,
that?
no,
When
tell us about that.
in the old days, Nickel Lock was the company that sold toilet stalls, and you had to stick a nickel in before the handle would open up the door. And they were in public, and it took 5 years for this legislation to get through to make it to outlaw nickel lock or pay toilets in buildings that had government funding. And what's interesting is someone had asked me, because women really backed her on this issue, but it was actually a military guy who was returning from his deployment at the airport who didn't have the change to go into the toilet, and he messed his pants. And he told Auntie March about that problem. And so she ran with it for 5 years to get the law changed so that there are no longer pay toilets in public buildings. But, on one hand, she was embarrassed that she was known as the pay toilet lady. But, in politics, it's what gets you name recognition and positive name recognition.
Yeah, for commitment and follow through. and not
Yeah.
stopping until it was achieved.
Well, that's actually what always happens, though. It takes a lot of years for legislation to make it through. Anyway, after being in the assembly for like 8 years, Jerry Brown was going to run for governor, and the Secretary of State position was opening up. So she ran for that. And me and my cousin, we took off this quarter from college and went to LA to run the LA headquarters. She won that election. It was a statewide election. She was only known in Northern California. Most of the votes are in Southern California. But the theory is that most of the people running against her, most of the Democratic candidates who were running against her were LA people. So they split the LA votes among themselves. She carried Northern Cal, picked up some of the LA votes. And she made it onto the ballot for the Secretary of State race in 74 and won it. And she
Wow.
kept,
Oh my gosh. As you go, I just want to interrupt again to ask, like, what was her superpower? Because I mean, at one point you said, well, she ignored them all. Like she ignored people saying, no, you can't. And I'm like, I think in the press release about the book, it says she was told you can't do this, that, or that. You could just be a secretary. And then it turns out she becomes a secretary of the state. But what was it like? It was her ability to just ignore and not take in people saying, no, you can't, and her humor. And what kept her going? Was it because so many people, how did she get to know people and win their trust?
when she campaigned, her rule was always to not smear her opposition, but to build on and let people know what she's managed to get done in her career. That might have been part of it because she always had left a good feeling. She was really good at names, though. She could remember everyone's name. And when it came to making a presentation to an ethnic group that had a specific language, she'd learn how to do an intro in the language of their
Wow.
native language. And that kind of stuff really impresses people.
Sure does.
She was always fighting for the small guy. She was fighting against big power, big money. And, it's sort of, it bit her in the butt, though, because she never was a great fundraiser. So she ran statewide campaigns on very little money. But her name recognition got to the point where she always was the top vote getter on those statewide campaigns.
Wow.
I mean, she'd be far ahead of governors and all treasurers and attorney generals. She was the top vote getter, and that's probably why no one ran against her. Well, they ran against her, but she kept on winning, and she held the position for nearly 20 years.
Wow.
So, and then after that, she started getting interested in federal stuff. So she worked on presidential campaigns and got appointed to be ambassador by Clinton to the Federated States of Micronesia, which is like 2 days away from here because you have to island hop to get there.
Wow.
And some of those islands are not, I mean, their runways are like 10 inches above the sea level. So their global warming's really affecting them. So she was the first Asian woman to be elected in a constitutional level position in the whole country.
In the whole country.
In the whole country.
Wow.
And she was the first Asian assemblyman woman in California. She was the first Asian Secretary of State, but there are not that many people who run for Secretary of State. So she was quite remarkable. You gotta have a big ego to do this, right? To be in politics, you've got to do it. And she managed to stay away from the controversy. Remember when we had that problem? It was called the Asian Donor Gate or something like that, where big
I
bucks
don't
were
think
coming in from.
I wasn't in California at that time. I'm
Oh,
not familiar with it.
No, it was affecting Clinton and Gore too.
Oh, okay.
Big money was coming in from Asia,
Oh, yes.
and
Yes.
frankly, overseas Asians don't know how to follow the federal campaign rules. They just think they're going to wash it, and it doesn't work that way. So yeah. Anyway, Auntie March, thank God, she wrote a contract with Tim Vandehey, a ghostwriter. So if you ever want to do your own biography and you don't want to write it, hire someone. He took 28 boxes of stuff, which was organized by the co-writer, Karen Daniel Mead, and wrote this book. He said he didn't have to do a lot of research beyond, because everything was in these boxes, and she kept everything. There were greeting cards in these boxes that I thought, I think I sent that. And it was still there. So he managed to, she commissioned him to write this biography. She didn't want it published in her lifetime. She died in 2017, which was 8 years ago. And I think what she didn't want to do is deal with this promotion stuff, because when you promote a book and want to distribute it, there's a lot of ego in there. And she was really very conscious of not looking very self-promoting and egotistical. But 2 years after she died, they dedicated the whole Secretary of State building complex to her, because she fought for that. No one wanted to put money into the archives, and she and her offices of the Secretary of State were scattered all over the place. So the whole complex, which includes the California Museum, which is a great museum of California history, was dedicated to her in 2019.
Wow.
But let me tell you about growing up with Auntie March.
Please.
I was lucky because I was close in age to her two kids. And so when she was in the assembly and she didn't have daycare, she took us to work. We spent summers in Sacramento running errands for the office, using the copier that's in the hallway, going to the bill room to get copies of bills. And then we'd explore the place. And what's really crazy is, I figured I was probably 12, 13 years old. We were not scolded at all. Of course, little Asian kids probably aren't as rambunctious as the other ones. But they got used to us just being around the state capitol, wandering and doing our thing. So she broke down that barrier too. Take your kids to work. And my cousin Kip, people may know him as Matt Fong, because he ran for treasurer and he ran for Senate. One summer, I remember he went into the typing pool. So to keep him busy, they sent him to the place where all the typists are. So we were really, we grew up with privileges that I'm starting to recognize. I didn't learn until a lot later that these guys who took us out for dinner were lobbyists. But you got two kids to feed, get the lobbyists to pay them, feed them.
Okay, my children are coming with me.
Yeah, you got 2 more mouths or 3 more mouths to feed. The Capitol got really used to us too, because I remember when I was just getting my driver's license, I was the oldest of all 3 of us. So I got my driver's license first. They actually let me check out her car from the state capitol garage, and we went joyriding. And I think it was a Cadillac. And it's like, this little kid's gonna drive this car out here. They no questions asked. They didn't even ask to see my driver's license. We just, because underneath the Capitol is a full garage valet system for all the legislators. So there's parking spaces. You just drive up the driveway and leave the keys in the car, and they put it away.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. I love
here's a
that
little
image.
kid.
I love that image. I can see the valet kind of going, okay, here's the keys. I
Well,
guess,
yeah, okay. Then I have to tell you what happens sometimes, though. I mean, in the winter, if we wanted to go skiing, they managed to find someone to drive us to the slopes. It was really, I mean, there were some privileges there, but yeah, somehow they found resources to get our
well,
day,
well,
get us up there.
well, yeah, that's something else to like step back and recognize privileges you had. Also, I appreciate that, but I also am wondering how much you think your own career, because you were the YOLO County Deputy District Attorney, and you edit Current's newsletter, and you've had quite a successful professional career yourself. How much, or just in what ways do you think your Aunt March influenced your like confidence and your drive to decide what you wanted to do and go for it and succeed?
What's interesting is that she never told me to go to law school, but she told other people to,
Mm,
which is interesting. I did, after I graduate from UC Berkeley, my first job was in civil rights,
mm,
an organization called Chinese for Affirmative Action in San Francisco. And we actually did head-ons with Auntie March, because when the 1975 Voting Rights Act brought in amendments requiring things be translated, Auntie March's office, not saying it's going to cost too much, we're going to tear down too many trees, we can't do it. And
wow.
from our perspective, from the Chinese community, the Chinese language community, is like, it's the spirit behind it. It's not whether you're going to translate every darn word. It's the spirit of getting people to be more knowledgeable and feel more welcomed on voting. And so, yeah, we actually had head-ons because Auntie March's office was saying, "Oh, this is going to cost you $1 million, and we're going to, waste all this paper, and it's just and not that many people are going to ask for this." But the thing is that her father, our grandfather, he didn't speak much English at all, but he voted every time. He was one of these guys who claimed that he was born in America and couldn't prove it because of the 1906 earthquake. I mean, there's a whole generation of Chinese who took advantage of the earthquake, but he read Chinese newspapers all the time. So why shouldn't he have access to more official stuff, and be a more knowledgeable voter? Um, so
Absolutely.
so we had head-ons. Um,
Did you ever
but
talk about the head-ons like at her house or your mom's house? Did you ever talk about that when you were in personal settings?
you know what? We avoided it, but you know what? It was really significant because her right-hand person, Tony Miller, he brings it up still today. It's like, oh my God, that's like 40 years ago. But yeah, no, it must have really hurt. Um, but in the other ways, she made voting much more available. And unlike what's going through this Trump administration, where they're going to require ID and starting to challenge everyone to vote, Auntie March in her career had to hire someone to investigate alleged voter fraud. And in the book, it says, yes, she hired Richard Nieto and there was no work for him to do. So he signed him to other things because they just didn't find voter fraud.
Hmm.
And she is told, if she was alive now and 30 years younger than what she would have been at her prime, she would have head-ons with Trump because, Trump doesn't like Asian women and he doesn't want people to vote. and she wanted everyone to vote, and she wanted to encourage people to vote. They even had, when she was Secretary of State, which is the chief election officer, she did voter registration campaigns. She started postcard voter registration, and that evolved into this whole thing of re-registering when you go to DMV and change your address. She was
Wow.
totally opposite of what this Trump administration is doing in terms of discouraging people from voting, and yeah, no, it's just totally. It would have been interesting if she was alive in this time, but she's turning over in her grave. I know.
So
She
she
turned
was
over.
helping actually expand voting access.
She took on the networks because there was one campaign, I can't remember which one it was, where the East Coast projected who's going to win. And so it made our voter turnout fall on the West Coast. And there was no law. They couldn't figure out any law to keep the networks from doing that projection, other than embarrass them. And so she was good at media. She worked her hardest to embarrass the networks, to restrain themselves, to not
Wow.
call the election from the West Coast or from the
Wow.
East Coast.
So she
Because
influenced that. Yeah, because they're 3 hours ahead.
yeah.
So she had an influence.
Well, you know what? Though the influences doesn't last real long because the networks forget, right? They get so excited. So it's a pressure that you have to keep on doing, because yeah, during those campaigns, it affects our elections on statewide things, on propositions and such. She really battled with the networks.
Well, she sounds so courageous.
Yep. No, she was pretty. And so she wanted this book written because she wanted people to be encouraged to do public service and to be honest and upstanding politicians and leaders. And so whenever she would run into a young kid who says, I just want to be like you, she was so tickled because that was her goal. And she definitely wanted this book printed. And so right now we're in the process of getting it out there. The state library is working with me right now. We've done events in Oakland and Sacramento. I've got one in LA on the 29th of May. And we're on the Amazon. We've got on Amazon. We've got a bookstore that's carrying it. So no, her life is something. It's her playbook. This book, it's her playbook of how she did it and what people can learn, and that you can't get scared off by the money and the bullies. So she was she's special in that way. And
wow, that must have taken a lot of stamina to persist and sustain.
You know, another thing that though she wanted people to know, in her later years, she took up Chinese brush painting, and she is actually pretty good at it.
Oh, wow! So there are some of her paintings in the book.
Yeah,
and
these are big paintings. These are like probably 5 feet tall.
Wow, where are they?
Those are in China, at some university in China. But she also did like landscape.
Wow.
And so because she was famous, Chinese painters from Asia, the old master types, she would meet them in Asia, or they would come visit here and tutor her.
Wow.
I mean, so she had the privilege of being tutored by some of these great masters, and painting side by side in the I think it's a traditional way of learning how to do this. And remember when I told you that she wasn't a great fundraiser? she
Yes.
ended up using her paintings to raise money for campaigns, because you
Wow.
can come out with an original painting, March Fong Eu painting.
Wow.
So
Was the last position she held being the ambassador when President
yes,
Clinton, that was,
yeah,
and how long was she an ambassador?
just 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a funny story about that is that, did you know that ambassadors are higher than 4-star generals
No, I did
in
not.
rank? Because
No.
of something. Yeah, apparently because she retired to this place in Fullerton, Morningside, and there was a retired general there who she befriended, and once they sort of pulled rank on each other, and he acknowledged ambassador outranks him. She had more stars than he did. Anyway, everything that she stood for, I mean, because she was a dental hygienist, she was behind that fluoridation, the early days of introducing fluoride to the water system.
Mm.
And here under Kennedy, we've got the same old arguments, and
Yeah.
we've got, and so we're just going backwards. And she would be, the way that Trump is whitewashing history now, they'd probably blank out her name and blank out her picture on everything, because she's DEI up and down.
That's
So
that's entirely possible that they're trying to erase her as well.
we had this one question at one of the book events, was she more of an Asian advocate or a women's advocate? And I think the writer, Tim Van de Hey, is correct. The misogyny was what affected her more than the racial being Asian. But because the whole all those early battles that she had was whether she got respect, whether she was respected as a woman. So yeah. Anyway, her, politics is tough, and so she divorced her first husband, the dentist husband, early on, and married Henry Yu around the time she became Secretary of State. That was sort of awkward because Henry Yu was came from a wealthy family in Asia. And so when Auntie March was interested in running for Senate, the whole issue about the husband's wealth was becoming an issue. And he was a very private person, and that was one way of bowing out of that campaign. Another real testy thing was when her son Matt, his name was Matthew Kipling Fong. We grew up calling him Kip, but when he became a political person, he took on the name. He used Matt, his first name. Anyway, he became a Republican at some point. And
how'd she feel about that?
It's in the book. He described a meeting that she called with all her political advisors to test him, to try to talk him out of it.
Why is it, let's say, like an actual, like almost an intervention? Wow, how did that go?
Well, he stayed Republican, and the Republican Party would use him to try to use him against her. He disclosed that he was asked to be a surrogate for the Republican Party at some events that she would be profiled at. And he was asked to debate his mom. He says, "No, I'm a military man. I'm not going to brace up against a woman. I'm not going to do it against my mom."
Good for him.
But when when he agreed to run against Barbara Boxer,
Yes.
that was a real test because he was criticized for using some of Ampty March's image in the early part of his campaign. And then it got down to, should she just endorse her or not? You know, is it what's the loyalty, to family or to party?
Wow. Oh,
And
tell us how that went.
she ended up endorsing him. He didn't win. Barbara Boxer won.
Right.
But you know what? It destroyed her political career. And I think he asked for her endorsement because he figured she was at the end of her political career. After she was done with Micronesia, she came back and she was bored. And she actually ran again for Secretary of State. But, you know, the Democratic Party was not going to forgive her for that Barbara Boxer thing.
Wow,
So,
that's very interesting and painful and understandable also that
yeah.
wow.
She lost that. Yeah, she lost that 2001 primary to Kevin Shelley, who ended up resigning with some sort of campaign finance problem. But it was worth it because they became closer.
She and her son.
Yeah. But okay,
Well,
you'll like this
that's good.
though. When Matt died, they had a huge funeral for him in Southern Cal, and all the big Republican leaders took the microphone, and they all said, Matt Fong, he was a great man. He ran against Barbara Boxer. They didn't say anything about his achievements or his contribution to the party or anything. It was just one after another. We love him because he ran against Barbara Boxer. So they used him. They probably had no viable candidate to run, and they had this guy who's got name recognition and
Through his
who's
mother.
willing to put us, yeah. And yeah, that was just amazing for me to sit through that funeral and see him being
that must
praised as, yeah. But you know, it was like, I mean, I think one of them was even Governor Wilson. I mean, yeah, we love Matt Fong because he ran against Barbara Boxer. Yeah.
That's a shame. Let me ask you, because believe it or not, we have only 6 minutes left. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your, if she got behind you once you started going to law school, like if she kind of noticed and appreciated that. I mean, I know she loved you, of course, but it's interesting that she encouraged other people to go to law school, had not encouraged you, but you chose to. Is there any more kind of interchanges you can share with us about that, or attitude shift?
Well, I found a note in her stuff that said, no, I found it was in my stuff. Sorry, I didn't come to your graduation, but I missed the invitation. It's like, oh yeah, I guess she wasn't there. She, you know, she liked my company. I mean, once she came, she had a speaking event in Woodland, and her people had to scope out the DA's office in Woodland, because they have to check security and all that. She came to pick me up, take me to her speaking engagement. I went to a lot of dinners with her. It was actually, it's sort of a lonely career being a politician. And family is easy company. So I went on a lot of dinners with her.
Wow.
And actually what's really funny is, okay, it was when I was a prosecutor, I'd be sitting in the car talking to her drivers, because her drivers were all CHP officers or state officers. They were cops. And I'd be talking cop stories with the drivers while we're going off to some event. And I know she's listening. So I think she actually was proud of me. But, Chinese don't really articulate proudness.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like kind of the humility and the humbleness, because I was thinking, I bet she was very proud of you, but probably that's not something to express, you know, or
Well,
lavish you with.
well, when she was down in Fullerton, I went down 2 or 3 times a year, and every time we would work on the book. And
Mm,
so, and I'm the only one who volunteered to do work on the book. And
mm,
she had no problem with. I'd sit there. Actually, it was a good conversation piece because I
I
could grill
bet.
her because I knew some of this history because I was growing up at the same time as she was doing it. Um, and so I could grill her and have conversations. Well, is it really this person who did this and that? And then because we
That's
were on the
great.
internet, we could Google everything to check it out. So yeah, she had no problem with me tinkling with the book, and she knew she wanted, and she never told me to stop working on it. And it's really
Oh,
funny. Of the beneficiaries, we had some naysayers who said, "No, let's not dump any more money into this book." I said, "No, we got to finish it because she really wanted it." And so it's like, oh my God, I got to find some market for these books. And so, yeah.
she was lucky. So lucky to have you by her side along the way too, and then at the end finishing something so important to her. We just have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to make sure I let people know about the Currents newspaper, and
Oh,
if you want to, if people can sign up for that, maybe you can say out loud how they could find that, the um, Asian American Pacific Islander Community News, and also how people can get the book, how and where people can get the
let's
M-
see.
March
You
Fong
can
Eu
get,
story.
yeah, it's available at Amazon, Pango Books, and Eastwind Books in the Bay Area. They're available at the book events, but you'll have to make it to LA on the 29th of May. Um, the Currents
Okay.
newspaper, if people want to get on the mailing list, they just need to email me, and I'll give up my email. I've been hacked enough. pmfong@hotmail.com.
pmfong at hotmail.com.
Hotmail.com. And
Okay.
the Currents newspaper is an Asian newspaper, and you can find it at the YOLO County libraries. There, I just dropped some off at City Hall, Davis City Hall. Um, Asian American Studies at UCD's getting their supply tomorrow. Um, oh, you can go Oto's Market on Freeport in Sacramento and get it. Um, there's usually some at Bell Coolidge Library in Sacramento. They're scattered here and there.
That's
But you
wonderful.
also can read it online at apsea.org. The Asian State Employees Association has been a great sponsor of the newspaper, and it's uploaded on their website under community involvement. So if you want to read electronic copy, you can apsea.org. You can find it there.
apse.com.
No, APSEA,
SEA.
Asian
Okay.
Pacific State Employee Association.org.
Okay. Okay. And you can find the Currents newsletter there online.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
and the next edition, if I'm not writing from El Salvador, the last edition is pretty heavily anti-Trump because Trump is destroying this country, and we need to do everything possible to protect democracy. So if I'm not arrested and shipped off to El Salvador by then, the next edition will come out in October. How about that?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you've done for your aunt, what you've done for our county, for so many people, yourself in public service all these years. And thanks for the Currents newsletter encouragement and action advice for people who want to use their voices to realign America back to its original constitutional values and principles.
Yes. It's not
Well,
make
it's time.
America great. It's not make America great again. We were already great. That's why everyone wants to come here. That's why we're the leading country in the world. So it's like he just wants to make it great for the white male again.
Thank you, Patty. On that note, I think we need to wrap up. So I want to thank you again, and thank you to all of our listeners and viewers, and to our engineer Rebel and our producer Dean Piper. And please tune in next Wednesday, 8 p.m. on It's Your Voice or Talk 4 TV. And may we all have enriching conversations, not just every week, but every day, because diversity helps expand our thinking, it helps us grow and learn, and helps us to become a more perfect union, which is a slow, long process, but we can keep moving forward. May we
Thank
all have
you.
enriching. Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Night.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech,